Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Smart Naruto Got Harem with Anko, Yugao, Hinata and Kurama, Part 3. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this and comment for next part. And now let's start the fanfic. Both Yugao and Iruka walked out into the yard to wait for Naruto to arrive. They hadn't long to wait as he landed the next second with a smirk on his face. Sorry about the wait, I had to convince Gigi to let me go all out on this one while in the village. Yugao blinked at that. You sure you need to Naruto? Naruto smirked. Of course I do. I need to show some people how to perform certain jutsu the right way. I hope everyone is watching. Naruto called only for them to look around to see nearly the entire class was glued to the windows looking out excited to see the show, making both sensei chuckle. Naruto smirked as he took several steps back and held his hands out to his sides. Okay ladies, this is what a real Kasai Hakushu can do. Naruto yelled before colliding his hands together aiming at the sky. He wasn't holding back, and it showed a lot. The fire chakra in Naruto's palms collided and the second combustion took place. The roar of the flame defended all. It was over 200 feet high and a roaring blue, showing the intensity of the heat, the result of which caused a massive updraft sending a wave of air out from Naruto's center which knocked both Yugao and Iruka on their backsides as the roaring flame continued to burn for the next 15 seconds before Naruto cut the chakra, extinguishing the flame immediately. Naruto smirked looking at the slack-jawed expressions on the entire class's face. Even Sakura, Hinata, was wide-eyed too, but when she saw Naruto looking in her direction she blushed, as did Ino, and the number of people doing the fish out of water impression jutsu was the total result, with one brooding emo, gnashing his teeth in rage at Naruto, making his jutsu look like a literal firecracker compared to the pillar of roaring flame Naruto had just done with ease. Naruto just looked to Yugao, just out of curiosity. Yugao-sensei, you would know, what is my highest recorded flame height and duration? Yugao smirked. Like you forgot, 270 meters tall, for a length of 50 seconds. Naruto grinned. No, he hadn't forgotten, and what would you have measured and timed Sasuke's at for his test? I'd say no more than 4 meters and lasted maybe 3 seconds, Yugao said with a smirk. Naruto grinned before cupping his mouth. Hear that, Sasuke? Not only is mine 500 times bigger than your, I can last over 10 times longer. I wonder what else that applies to. Naruto yelled, making all the males in the class burst out in laughter. And every female in the class blush, none more than Hinata, when she accidentally, activating her Byakugan when watching Naruto and focusing hard enough to see through his clothes. She had passed out looking like a boiled tomato with the amount of steam coming out her ears as he head raced with Eki thoughts as she muttered, so big, incoherently over and over again. She had not been able to sleep without wet dreams for 2 months after that incident and still had them every few weeks, recalling Naruto's sighs as she tried desperately not to her lips at the thought. Sigh. The class resident mute was actually shaking watching the display from the back of the groups, and the normally stoic boy only had one thought. Danzo-sama must be informed, the target is stronger than we anticipated, capture may not be possible. After shaking Iruka out of his shocked daze, the three of them went back inside for the results. Naruto walked in ahead of his two sensei and sat down next to Kiba, who bro-fisted. That was hilarious, dude. Kiba roared in laughter as he patted Naruto's back, who had a huge smirk on his face. Both Yugao and Iruka walked in moments later with clipboards with the results listed on them for each stage of the exam. Iruka began calling out names of those who had passed as Yugao handed out the headbands. Naruto took his and took the black and red tinted cloth he had brought and begun attaching the metal plating before taking a kunai and engraving the kanji for 9th to the bottom lower corner of the leaf symbol, before tying it proudly to his head. After Iruka had finished calling out the passes he then smirked. Now the moment you've all been waiting for, though it's not really a shocker, the results of the Rookie of the Year, and this goes too, like there was any contest, Naruto Uzumaki, with Sasuke Uchiha coming in second and Kunoichi of the Year goes to Hinata Hyuga, with Sakura Haruno coming in close second. There was a resulting cheer from the NFC, and even a few of the Sasuke girls cheered, not really expecting anything different after that demonstration. Kiba, Shikamaru, Shino, and Choji were all around congratulating Naruto, while Ino was congratulating Hinata. Both knew of the other's feelings for Naruto, and both had used the competition between them to better themselves after Naruto had said outright in class one day that he detests fangirls and respects strong kunoichi. Both girls had doubled their training, and both knew the only reason Sakura had come in second place was due to her large forehead memorizing all the dates and everything on the exam, and because of its high percentage of the overall exams, which confused the hell out of most. Book smarts won't keep you alive if you're frail and weak. Well, most of the time, both girls had gone to their fathers for extra training. When they were asked why, they both gave the answer Naruto that had given to why he respected strong kunoichi, because they can protect the ones they hold dear. The celebrations were cut short by Sakura managing to focus all her chakra, which wasn't very much, into the seal, breaking it, thus releasing her banshee voice. No way, that blonde baka is better than Sasuke-kun, no way in hell that baka must have cheated. The screeching was so loud that the glass shattered in the windows of the room and everyone held their ears till it ended, until the entire class yelled back, excluding Sasuke, "Give it a rest, you screeching banshee howler monkey bitch." Even Iruka joined in while applying a healing jutsu to his ears to repair the damaged nerves from the vocal attack. Sasuke just grunted at the scene, like, "I care about some title, it's his worthless title, it's worthless just like that extinct clan of yours, dope." Sasuke smirked. Naruto's hands clenched as he restrained himself from attacking and pounding the emo into the dirt. Kiba was growling at the insult. He knew how much Naruto's mother's clan meant to him, and this bastard dissing it was about to get ankicking. Whether Naruto did it himself or Kiba had to, he would get it. Everyone else in the class just glared in anger at the last Uchiha, except for Sakura. Even the other Sasuke fangirls glared at him, the minor feelings for him gone, and with it, only Sakura remained devoted to the last Uchiha. Naruto smirked. "You know, Sasuke, you're not one to judge. We're both the last of our clans. At least mine went out with a bang, taking out 8,000 enemy shinobi while protecting the civilians of its village in a 3-day bloody battle. Remind me how yours went out again." "Oh, that's right, wiped out silently in a single night by one man, without so much as a sound, like a fly passing gas," Naruto said with a grin, as everyone else burst out laughing. Sasuke, on the other hand, wasn't so impressed, immediately lunging at Naruto. "No one insults the Uchiha, bastard," and came at Naruto with a kunai, which Naruto blocked, pulling his Bakken up before delivering a kick to the Uchiha's solar plexus, sending him down the steps, and Naruto stood up. "You threw the first insult, Tem. I was just returning the gesture, but if you really want to fight, I'd be happy to give you one. I'll even put my title as Rookie of the Year on the line, as technically the last day hasn't ended yet," Naruto declared as he pointed his Bakken at the scowling emo prince. "You're on dope. I'll show you your stupidity." In insulting the Uchiha, Sasuke spat out as Sakura swooned over him. The entire class face-palmed. The pinklet was as hopeless as the emo, and Iruka shook his head. "All right then, let's get this over with. Everyone out to the pitch for this match for Rookie of the Year," he said, gesturing to the door. Everyone went out, but no one noticed the shadow clone Naruto made staying behind before shining to the Hokage's office to fill him in on what's going on. Scene break. Everyone started going out the doors to the main yard, and not surprisingly, the parents of most of the students were there. Even Hiashi had showed up for Hinata. After Hinata had taken on the extra training, she had stopped holding back in her spars and finished everyone in the shortest times so as to not hurt her opponents too badly. She still had a kind heart but a strong outer, which Hiashi couldn't be more proud of. He had managed to placate the Hyuga elders in waiting till Hanabi's graduation in 4 years' time to put the seal on her, as Hinata was the current heir to the clan head seat. It was all he could do to buy time to find some way to save her from the fate his brother had of being branded by that seal, and the way that his nephew had on Hinata's 4th birthday. Had Hisashi been there, he would have stopped it, but he had been too late, and the seal was permanent until death. There was no way to remove it. Inoichi had shown up for Ino as well. He had been very pleased when she had stopped fawning over the Uchiha boy. He had never liked him, and finding out she was now focusing on Naruto and Naruto had said something to make her want to train harder, he was over the moon, and would be indebted to the boy for this. However, both fathers and everyone else there grew curious as to why the class was going over to the sparring area. Hiyashi came up beside Hinata. Hinata, what is going on? Have the exams not finished yet? Hinata looked at her father with a smile, something she had been doing a lot more of. Hi, To-sama, they have. I was announced Kunoichi of the year, and Naruto-kun was giving Rookie of the year. It wasn't the fact that Hinata had been top of the Kunoichi that had shocked Hiyashi, and it wasn't Naruto being Rookie of the year that shocked him either. He had heard of the blonde continuously dominating every class at the academy, so that was no shock at all. It was the suffix she used when she mentioned him, and at that Hiyashi smiled. Oh, it's Naruto-kun, is it? He said with a victorious smirk on his face. Now at least he knew who to thank for Hinata's determination and newfound will to improve. He would definitely have to thank Naruto, though judging from the stuttering and the redness of Hinata's face she would be giving him thanks herself one day. And that made Hiyashi chuckle mentally. You're exactly like your mother Hinata, full of love and so caring to those who you love, and if you're anything like her and the other Hyuga ladies in the bedroom, Naruto is going to have his hands full one of these days, but should he even try to hurt you, the blonde will know what it's like to have every chakra point of his manhood sealed shut forever, of however long it takes for cut off the blood flow and make it shrivel up and fall off, which if I remember is 4 days. Hi, To-sama it is, Hinata responded, fighting back her stutter and blush as she spoke. The entire class is gathering to watch a spar over insults thrown in class. Naruto-kun fighting Uchiha-san. Uchiha-san started the insults by calling Naruto's clan worthless and Naruto responded by saying, Hinata started, but then she was cut off when Hiyashi stopped her. Hinata, did you just say Naruto is from a clan, the Uzumaki clan? Hiyashi asked, eyes widened. Hinata nodded. Hi To-sama, I did. We found out halfway through the second year shortly after Yugao sensei joined us. Naruto's mother was the survivor from Uzu, who came here to live after her clan perished. Hiyashi's mind was racing. It had all made sense. He had been part of the squad that had found Naruto after the sealing with both Kushina and Minato outside of the walls when he had served his time as Anbu. He had been in Minato's squad as Genin, and the two of them were close, so he was one of the 12 who had been invited to the wedding. He had thought that the hair and eyes were just a side effect of Minato sealing the kyubi in the boy like his whisker marks. And he thought that the Uzumaki name had been due to Kushina not wanting her name to die out. He hadn't seen her in 9 months, but that was normal. Shinobi often took long missions that could last for extended periods of time, and sometimes friends didn't see each other for years because the time they were in the village didn't match up, but that had been the life, but now it had all made sense. She had been pregnant, and Naruto was Minato's. How he had let it slip by him for so long he had no clue. I'm a fool, Hiyashi muttered to himself, barely audible. Hinata blinked. What was that To-sama? She asked, not hearing what he had said. Snapping himself back to reality, knowing he would have to have had a long talk with the Sandame about crucial secrets afterwards, he filed that way for later. Nothing Hinata. Now what exactly was said? What was this argument? After several seconds of Hinata relaying what had happened in the classroom, Hiyashi was doing everything in his mind not to go over there and pound the Uchiha himself. Well, let's go watch the ignorant boy get his beating then, shall we? Insulting such a clan as the Uzumakis is most foolish, and if Naruto-san is anywhere near as powerful as his ancestors, the Uchiha will not win. Ino and her father had had a similar talk at the same time. Needless to say, Inoichi was shocked to hear that Naruto was from a clan, and Kushina was his mother, but it had answered the question where had that fire jutsu came from all those years ago. It was an Uzumaki jutsu, and they were renowned for being strong and taxing on chakra. He knew Minato from the academy and they often had words. He was just assigned second head of T&I when Minato became Yondaime, and he figured something had been up when the child the Kyuubi had been sealed and came back looking like him and with the last name Uzumaki. He had his hunches and this had just confirmed it. And now needless to say both fathers were mentally plotting how to arrange marriage contracts for their girls and Naruto. As the groups all gathered around the ground and Naruto and Sasuke walked out into the sparring arena, both Sume and Hana made an appearance. Both were wondering what all the fuss was about when they saw it was Naruto versus Sasuke and smirked as they came up to Kiba. So what the pompous brat do this time to earn himself a beating, and what was with Naruto-kun firing off that fire jutsu earlier? He spooked half the dogs in the kennel without a barrier when they felt the chakra spike, Sume asked crossing her arms. Kiba looked at his mother. Well, the jutsu was Naruto putting Sasuke down in a big way after the thieving bastard had attempted to perform his own piss-poor version of it, which pissed Naruto off in a big way, it being one of his clan's jutsu and all. Sume's eyes widened hearing that and she grabbed Kiba's shoulders and turned him to her glaring at him. What do you mean, Naruto's clan? The last Uzumaki died in the Kyuubi attack besides, weren't all Uzumaki redheads? Kiba looked to his mother, who was normally this pushy on stuff like this, and it was scared him a little. Yay, that's what Naruto said as well, but he said he gets his hair and eyes from his dad. His mother was the only survivor from Kushina Uzumaki. Sume's eyes bulged hearing that and she looked at Naruto. He's alive, she said looking like she had seen a ghost before. She covered her mouth as her eyes rimmed with tears before looking like she wanted to kill someone. Kiba was worried now. Ka-san, what's wrong? What's got you so upset? Sume took her hand away from her mouth as both of her hands formed fists. Kushina was one of my dearest friends. The Uzumaki clan and the Inuzuka both held each other in high regard as we both had the same motto, loyalty and family above all. There was a bond between our clans that stretched back generations. When the Uzumaki were all but wiped out in the Second Shinobi War, the entire Inuzuka clan held the mourning ceremony for them. I became good friends with Kushina in the weeks that followed and even afterward when we were both pregnant again around the same time. You were born first and Kushina was still expecting, but I had gotten word that she and the baby had died. I cried for days over the loss of my friend and her child. Kushina had asked me to be her child's godmother and I had asked her to be yours. Before it all, Sume said as she slowly started to shake with rage. Her fang and claws grew out. I'm going to murder those bastards at the next meeting, she growled out in anger. Kiba's eyes widened hearing that. He hadn't known the Uzumaki and Inuzuka were so close. He had never told anyone else about Naruto's clan, mainly due to the fact when he asked Naruto more about it, he had said to keep it to himself that if the council found out he knew about the Uzumakis and that he was Kushina's son it would bring up questions he and others weren't ready to answer yet. Hana's eyes grew wide hearing that. She had a few memories of Kushina when she was a child, and she had also cried hearing that Kushina and her child had died in the attack. Emotions running high, all three Inuzuka could only do one thing, and that was yell, kick Hisnaruto. Naruto smirked hearing the Kiba's family yell, and he couldn't help but mentally yell back, you got it, as he clenched his fists and his knuckles popped as he rotated his shoulders flexing up. He was actually going to put effort into this fight. It was his time to show everyone just what he was capable of, and Sasuke would be the lucky punching bag that he would be demonstrating on. Naruto smirked as he walked onto the practice area and he felt the memories of his shadow clone come back to him, and then a second later the Sandaime arrive at the side of the ring with two of his Anbu, one in a white boar mask with a single red stripe down through its left eye and one in a white hawk mask with a yellow stripe from the bottom to just below its right eye. Seeing the third fire shadow appear in a swirl of leaves, everyone bowed their heads to him in respect as was custom, except for the last Uchiha who just grunted. Hiruzen raised his hand gesturing for everyone to return to normal. Relax everyone, I just came to watch the match. I understand that certain things were said that could leave a bad taste in some's mouth, so I figured I had better come to make this an official match so that no one decided to try and get payback for an allied clan being insulted at the end. Hearing that all three Inuzuka pouted a little, miffed that they wouldn't be able to beat the shit out of the Uchiha themselves, but decided that Naruto would do a good enough a job of it for all three of them. Naruto smirked, looked to the elderly Hokage and gave a small bow. "I'm a genin now, Gigi," he said with a hidden meaning. The elderly Hokage nodded back. "That you are, my boy, that you are, go ahead." Naruto grinned like a madman, while at the side of the ring, Kiba's eyes widened. "He's going to take them off," he said below his breath in shock, making Sum and Hana look to him in confusion. "Take what off, pup?" Sum asked with a raised eyebrow. Kiba gulped. "His seals, he always has them on. I lost count of the times he's upped the restriction and increased the weight. It looks like we're finally going to see what Naruto can really do. He never let me watch when he took them off to adjust. We're in uncharted territory here." Sum blinked and then looked back to the field with Hana not wanting to miss anything. Kiba's little talk hadn't been missed by the other spectators. Shikamaru was watching as well with a raised eyebrow, curious as to just what Naruto was capable of. He had been watching the blonde over the 4 years and he was still an enigma to this day. Sai, who had been listening from the back, narrowed his eyes looking at Naruto, measuring up every detail as he mentally recorded it to report later. Naruto brought both of his hands into a ram seal and smirked. "I hope you're ready, Tem, cause I'm about to beat you senseless." The Uchiha smirked as he took his stance. "Quit your stalling, dope. We both know who's going to win here. Only an Uchiha can beat an Uchiha." Naruto continued to smirk as the Uchiha talked, before he closed his eyes and muttered a single word, "Kai," as he felt his weights and restrictions instantly drop and every muscle in his body relax. He hadn't dropped his weights in a while, so it definitely felt good. As he began to rotate his shoulders and move his limbs, so light, oh, this was going to be so much fun. Naruto slowly dropped back into a loose stance. Over the years he had expanded his styles and learned more than just his clan's style. He had begun working on his own style 2 years back, but had yet to put it fully into practice, but now was as good a time as any. He held both his arms loosely as his stance widened, his fists balled and his right foot raised at the heel like he was taking a sprinter's stance. Iruka raised his hand at the side of the ring and looked to both teens before nodding and dropping his hand. "Hajime." No sooner had he said it, Sasuke shot at Naruto at full speed. In the 4 years he had gotten much faster and was now much stronger, but not strong enough. He flew at Naruto and came in for a spinning roundhouse kick on Naruto left, but Naruto was just waiting for Sasuke to come in close. Bending his left leg slightly, he smirked, before he did something that made everyone do the fish out of water jutsu. With a single one-leg hop, he shot of the ground into a leap, throwing himself into a backward somersault while at the same time twisting himself and throwing his right leg into a kick aimed right at Sasuke's face, and all in a split second, before it made impact. Whack! The impact was made, and the Uchiha was sent crashing to the ground in a rolling skid, as Naruto continued his back flip before landing with gentle ease and a smirk still present. Sasuke was rolling on the ground, clutching his head in pain from the kick as Naruto crossed his arms. "I hope you're paying attention, Uchiha. This is the one style that your Sharingan will never be able to copy, as no matter how hard to try without the right body it's impossible." With the pain subsiding, Sasuke stood up and spat the blood out of his mouth as he glared at Naruto. "What are you talking about, dope? There's no style the Sharingan can't copy." Naruto shook his head. "Not my style. I developed it for that specific reason in mind. Without the exact training, you can never use my style. It's based on the Uzumaki Taijutsu style, focusing primarily on kicks and rapid powerhouse attacks, but it has one crucial difference." Sasuke snarled and sprinted at Naruto as he pulled out a kunai for an attack. "And what's that, dope?" Naruto grinned as Sasuke came at him, and he twisted his body slightly before speaking. "It's all in a single movement," he said before he threw his balled fist into Sasuke's gut with such speed he was just a blur. Sasuke's eyes bulged and he lurched forward from the impact, but he didn't even have time to get his breath back before a second fist impacted his gut, and then a third, and then a fourth, followed by another and another. They just kept coming, before one came stronger than all the others, and this one sent Sasuke flying and rolling heels over head in a backward skidding roll before landing in a heap 10 meters back. Naruto stood with his fist outstretched in the same stance that he had stood in throwing the first punch, and everyone watching was looking on in confusion at what they had just seen. For the 5 seconds after the first impact, it looked like Naruto hadn't even moved an inch, but yet Sasuke was launched so far compared to the slight movement Naruto had just made. When in reality he was moving too fast for the eye to see and delivered multiple punches to the Uchiha's gut in the blink of an eye. Lowering his stance, Naruto smirked. I've spent the past 2 years developing my style and building my body up in such a way to maximize its strengths. Each day I wore weights that would make it impossible for me to move. And then made it harder with restriction seals adding to the pressure. All the time my muscles were being torn and shredded as I moved, but they healed over and over, each time getting stronger than the last, and all the time I was pulsing chakra through them, strengthening them further. That is why my style can't just be copied. Without my body or training it is impossible to even attempt my style. The explanation got a few nods from around the area. He was right, it didn't matter if you copied the stances or got the movements down right. Without the muscles or the training that Naruto had gone through, the style didn't have the same power behind it. Sasuke growled as he stood up. We'll see about that when I unlock my Sharingan. I'll just prove you wrong then, he said before weaving through his hand signs in a blur before taking in a deep breath. Kaden. Gokaku. Shori no Hano, fire style. Great fireball. Victory flame, Sasuke roared as he spewed out a stream of flames at Naruto, who just stood there as the flames came at him. The crowd gasped as the flames grew closer. But Naruto smirked before he raised his right arm and then pushed it forward. It looked like it had taken no effort, but with a single thrust of his arm the force of wind it created met the fire and overpowered it, breaking it apart before it made contact with Naruto and then continued before it hit a very surprised Sasuke, who was sent flying backwards and hit the wall on the other side of the academy, causing a Sasuke-size crater, with a groaning emo prince in the middle of it whose head was spinning. Naruto crossed his arms. Give up yet, Tem? Sasuke pushed himself out of the crater only to fall flat on his face. The emo wasn't done yet, but his head was spinning, and his legs were like jelly. How is he this much stronger than me? I'm an Uchiha, I should be crushing him. Standing up, Sasuke smirked as an idea came to him. What's the matter, dope? Finally realize how worthless you and your clan are compared to that of the Uchiha. Yours couldn't even be considered a clan. Your whore of a mother probably just spread her legs for the first willing fool she could find. Hearing the insult, those who knew Kushina started releasing Ki as they glared at the Uchiha, each of them mentally willing Naruto to kick the hell out of him. Sum-ing lost it. You little bastard, how dare you? Sum yelled as both Kiba and Hana desperately tried to hold her back, remembering the Hokage's words moments before. But at that moment he looked like he wanted to kick the crap out of the Uchiha himself for his words, but everything suddenly went to a dead screeching halt when a huge burst of Ki was released in the middle of the area as Naruto's hair shaded his eyes, and there were a few gulps around the area as the Ki spiked. You bastard! Naruto yelled before launching at the Uchiha, who at that precise moment realized his plan had just backfired in a major way. Naruto took off at high speed, leaving a singled crater from his footstep as he launched himself. He was so fast no one had time to think before a balled fist made contact with Sasuke's jaw and sent him skyward, launching him 30 feet into the air. Naruto bent his knees and launched himself up to meet him, creating another crater on launch. He came up to Sasuke, who had a glazed look in his eyes like he wasn't even there, but Naruto raised his leg high. Don't you ever! Naruto yelled as he dropped his leg on Sasuke's gut, firing him towards the ground hard. Sasuke hit the ground and bounced up as his eyes widened as he came back to a world of pain, only to see two slit red eyes glaring at him as Naruto was on him again, talking about my mother again. Naruto finished as he swung around and caught Sasuke's face with his boot hard and sent him shooting like a missile towards the wall he had previously hit, but this time he hit it with a crash and brought the whole wall and roof down on top of him. Everyone looked wide-eyed at the strength Naruto had just displayed. It was clearly well above genin level. Hell, most Chunin and Jonin weren't that strong to be able to put someone through a wall with a kick. Took a lot more strength than the average shinobi could muster even with daily training and major chakra reinforcement. Naruto growled, looking at the collapsed wall and the unconscious form of Sasuke inside, as he slowed down his breathing, his eye returning to their calm blue. Naruto crossed his arms. Well, that didn't go as I was planning it to go, but the result is the same nonetheless. What now, Gigi? The elderly Hokage sighed, shaking his head. Not much else for it, Naruto, my boy. Sounds like word of your mother has gotten to the ears of those here, so there are only the formalities left of the matter now. Naruto sighed as he flashed through a set of hand signs, reactivating his weights and seals. Great, another meeting, like I haven't been to enough of them in the past 4 years. You should have made me a counselor after the first 100, seeing as how I was the topic of every other meeting. It's like they've got nothing better to do than bitch and whine about me. The elderly Hokage sighed. Yes, that it does, but this one shouldn't take too long, not with the evidence. Naruto nodded. It had better. Anko-chan has made some rather scary threats that involved a certain color, a period of undermined time, and my balls that I'd rather not have come to pass, so I've got half an hour. Let's get this going already, Naruto said before turning to head to the council chambers. There was a mixture of various reactions around the practice field. Both Hinata and Ino were blushing up a storm hearing what Naruto had just said, both with a guess at what it meant, but both had a bit of jealousy at Anko having Naruto, and sadness for not being with him themselves. Both Inoichi and Hisashi had slight smirks on their faces, however subtle, as they hoped Naruto would accept their coming propositions, well aware of the CRA that would be placed on him given his future clan status. The three Inuzuka were grinning at the state of Sasuke, all of them wanting to see that prick get kicked from the start. He had just doomed himself by insulting Naruto's mother. Soon, when she heard of the future meeting, half grinned, half snarled. There were some questions that needed answering, and she was going to rip the balls off anyone who didn't give them to her. Sai, who had been watching with slight fear, but showing none, had analyzed every aspect of the fight and had no emotion displayed whatsoever as he turned and walked out of sight of the crowd before diapering in a shunshin to give his final report. Shikamaru, normally lazy, had been watching intently, and what he had seen and heard had only brought him more questions than answers. How was Naruto this strong? That method of training should be impossible for normal people. Torn muscles take time to heal on their own, and even with medical jutsu to speed up the process, to do it to such an extent in the brief span of 2 years shouldn't even be possible. Just what was Naruto hiding? Sakura was mortified at what she had just seen. There was no way her Sasuke-kun could lose like that. It had to be a fluke. While at the same time her mother was wide-eyed at the event she had just witnessed, her eyes building as she screamed inside her head, the demon has taken control, we're all going to die, find your happy place, find your happy place, find your happy place. Time skip. This is not good, I'm late, so very late, Naruto thought as he stood in the middle of the council chambers, with an irritable twitch very visible in his eye. This was supposed to be an easy thing to do, but these bastards just couldn't get over themselves. After Naruto's little display, he had just been planning to head home to meet Anko, who by now would be about ready to eat him alive, not in a good way, cause he had now been a genin for more than 3 hours, and had yet to keep his promise, and he knew she would be thinking of ways of various pleasurable torture methods to use on him for not screwing her brains out already. But it wasn't his fault. As soon as Naruto's little display was over, a council meeting was called by the Hokage to formally reinstate the Uzumaki clan back into Konoha, as both of them had been preparing for the past 2 years after Naruto had decided on exactly what he was going to do for his clan's future, but things were never that simple. As soon as he had arrived in the council room, the entire civilian side, Danzo excluded, were calling for his immediate execution. Half of them wanted it for what he did to the last Uchiha, and the other half wanted it just because he held the Kyuubi, but they were all yelling that there was no way he was Kushina's son. The Hokage had then presented the blood test results showing a 100% match for Kushina being his mother, but even after they yelled that it couldn't be. Are you bastards blind? Sume yelled in anger. He is her son, and you bastards have been treating him like the plague. If she was here right now, you all would be pulp. The roar of anger from Sume shocked Naruto slightly. He didn't know why she was so angry about this, well more than the rest of the clan heads by the looks of it, but then a fair few of them all had equally pissed off looks as well, Inoichi and Hiashi especially, which was strange given Hiashi never had anything other than a stoic look on him. But it doesn't make any sense. Who is the boy's father then? If his mother is Kushina, what is the other part of his blood? Asked one of the civilian counselors. Like it matters, barked Sume. What I want to know is why I was told that both Kushina and he died the night of the Kyuubi attack. Why was I lied to? I was meant to be his godmother for sake. That caught Naruto off guard and he looked to the angry woman in shock. Godmother, he said in shock. The letters his parents left him hadn't mentioned anything about godparents or that Sume was one of them, so this was news to him. Sume reined in her anger before looking to Naruto. Yes, Naruto, your mother and I were close friends back in the academy, and both of us were pregnant at the same time. I was to be your godmother, just as she was to be Kiba's and was already Hana's. Naruto's fists clenched. That had hit him hard. I never knew. Her and Two-san's letters to me never said anything about any godparents. Had I known I would have. Sume smiled sadly. It's all right, Naruto. I know you would have told me. She likely didn't mention me because she would have thought I'd be taking care of you. I would have too. I would have adopted you right into the clan and kept you safe, and Kiba would have had a brother figure 12 years sooner than he did, Sume said with a smirk as both her and Naruto smiled at that, but hers faded as she stood up. Now someone tell me, why was I told that my best friend and godchild died the night of the Kyuubi attack? Sume yelled, voice filled with anger, making some of the civilian in the room gulp in fear, but none more than the two pristine elders Homura Mitokado and Koharu Udatane. But in an instant the anger Sume was releasing was dwarfed by a surge of ki from the Hokage, making the woman gulp in fear as their leader reminded them why he was referred to as Kami of Shinobi. Hiruzen's eyes were filled with rage as the ki rolled off him in rage. He had been seething in it for the past few moments, but finally he had snapped. Sume-san, would you kindly tell me who it was that told you of Kushina and young Naruto's death? I had not been aware of you being his second godmother. As far as I knew, only Naruto's father had chosen godparents for him, but to hear that people have been told he died is most troubling, and I would like to find out why this has been so, the Hokage said in a low voice, making his anger known on the matter. Sume's eye opened at that. If the secret hadn't been started on the Hokage's order, then that means it had to have been someone deciding for themselves. That could have only have been the ones who told her of the deaths. In that instant Sume's ki matched that of the Hokage and she stood up and pointed a clawed finger across the room. It was that wrinkled old bitch over there that told me, she growled in anger. It was Koharu Udatane, the second half of the elders Sume was pointing at, and all eyes were on the older woman in that second, but the woman didn't even flinch. Koharu, explain yourself, the Hokage ordered, his tone demanding as the reined in his ki. The older woman remained steadfast as the questions were asked. She hadn't been a shinobi for 50 years for nothing. She stood up before answering. I have no regrets for my actions, nor do I deny them. Yes, I told Sume that thing died that night, because that is not Kushina's child. The old woman spat in disgust. The thing in front of us is the demon in human form. It can never be Kushina's child. The beast killed both Kushina and the Yondaime and took over her child's body. That thing is a demon, and should have been destroyed the moment we found you and not raised as a citizen of this village. There were a number of heated glares at the elderly woman in that instant for doing what she did, but when she finished speaking they were all dwarfed, even the Hokages, by the blondes in the center of the room as his ki was released. You bitch! Naruto yelled out in absolute rage. His eyes immediately turned from sapphire blue to crimson red and his pupils turned to slits. His canines grew longer, his whisker marks grew more pronounced, his hair grew out slightly and was more wild and his fingernails grew into claws. You bitch! Naruto snarled. Can't you see past your own misplaced hatred and see what's right in front of you? He yelled 1 second only to be gone, the next only to reappear at the side of the council chambers holding the old crown by her throat. It's because of you. You denied me everything, a home, a family. Do you have any idea what you took from me? He yelled, his clawed hand ready to rip her throat out, though she still managed to speak. So what? It was nothing, compared to the lives of the villagers you took that night, demon, she hissed, only to piss him off further. Why couldn't you have just stayed in hell where you belong? Naruto hit the breaking point at that moment. He had just snapped. What was it going to take to make these realize he wasn't the Kyuubi? Naruto-sama, please, let me have a word with them, perhaps I can get through to them, Akane spoke out from his mindscape. Okay, Akane-chan, but I think some truths need to be told first, Naruto thought back as he then dropped the counselor, as he had 3 Anbu guard around him, all with their ninja to drawn ready to drop Naruto on orders, but no sooner had the counselor been dropped, than the 3 Anbu found all their ninja to blades cut in half and lying on the floor, and the blonde was gone. Only for him to reappear back in the center of the room, his eyes returning to their normal blue. He then looked to the Hokage. Hokage-sama, I'd like to request that the actual truth behind what happened that night actually be told, and the facts about the Kyuubi be revealed. This got some shocks from others around the room, the fact that Naruto knew the Kyuubi was inside him for one, and the fact that the Hokage had known and never told them. Hiruzen looked to Naruto with saddened eyes. He could hear the sadness and pain in the blonde's voice. He could have actually had a family, people who cared for him, but it had all been torn away from him by these fools. Yes, Naruto, I believe it is time for the truth about the Kyuubi to be told, so we can perhaps put this matter to rest once and for all. Naruto then dropped to his knees and then crossed his legs as he sat down. This was going to be one long talk, and he was in for a pleasurable hell when it was all over, courtesy of Anko. Scene break, present time. The council room stood in silence as the Hokage finished explaining the truths of the Kyuubi, how it had been in the village for years before the attack, and how it was sealed inside Mito Uzumaki and then Kushina Uzumaki, both of which were considered SS-rank secrets. And then on top of that, the fact that a masked assailant with a Sharingan attacked Kushina the night she was giving birth, only to rip the Kyuubi from her and control it with the Sharingan to attack the village. And it was the same man who killed the late Bawako Sarutobi, wife to the current 3rd Hokage, while she was assisting in the birth, and that the Yondaime had been there to reinforce the seal during the birthing so the Kyuubi wouldn't break free. They still didn't want to reveal him as Naruto's father just yet. Naruto got to his feet. Do you see now? The Kyuubi has been in the village walls from the beginning. She never wanted to fight or destroy anything. As usual, conclusions were jumped to without all the facts. Naruto stated, his anger under control. Clenching his fists, Hiashi held in his anger for the pain that had been caused his best friend's son. Had he known, he too would have pushed for adoption for Naruto. Screw the elders. But now to hear that it was never the Kyuubi's fault for the attack, and to hear that even that blame had been misplaced, he was sickened by what he heard. But he steeled himself to get more information. Hokage-sama, might I ask how you came across this information and how we know it is viable? It could all just be speculation, not that I doubt it, I just wish to know its source and if it's reliable. The aging Hokage sighed and looked to Naruto, who nodded and stood up. It was 4 years ago, the day before I started the academy, that I first made contact with the Kyuubi, through the seal. This got a variety of mixed results. The shinobi gulping, hearing the fact the boy had been talking to the Kyuubi for so many years, while the civilians, well, their response was predictable as always. Traitor. Demon. It's all lies, he's the Kyuubi, put him down. Needless to say, they were quickly hit with a blast of Ki which made them shut up instantly. Naruto sighed before continuing, after meeting with the Kyuubi and being told what really happened, I immediately went to Hokage-sama to report what I had been told, and through comparing what she told us to events that happened, we came to the conclusion she was telling the truth. A few of the clan heads blinked at a certain phrase, and Inoichi was the first to speak. Excuse me, Naruto-san, but did you just say she, as in the Kyuubi, is female? Naruto nodded. Yes, I did, and her name is Akane. A few of the males in the room blinked at the fact while Sum growled, "What shocked a woman is the strongest of the Biju." This immediately got the male clan heads sweating while shaking their heads. No, Naruto and Hiruzen just chuckled at Sum busting their balls like that. "Naruto-sama, may I speak now?" Naruto mentally nodded before looking to the Hokage. "Gigi, someone else wants to take the floor." Hiruzen smirked. "Very well, Naruto. Call her out." Naruto stood in the lush green fields and forest area that was now his mindscape. It had taken him a few weeks, but he had created a huge 700-mile area of forest and grassland for Akane to enjoy to her heart's content. He had said if she was going to be stuck in here for now until he found a way to get her out, then he would at the very least give her a better place to live than a damn sewer of a jail cell. Looking around, he smiled at his work as he looked over the large expanse of area that stopped at a beautiful sandy beach with a crystal clear ocean. He had even filled the forest and grasslands with some smaller animals, insects and birds to make it more appealing. There was even fish in the ocean. It was a paradise in his mind. Looking back over the grassland, he saw the house he had made for her. A small little cottage. That was all she had said she wanted. It was a single-floor building with a simple wooden frame and walls. The trimmings had been painted white and the main body was a light brown with 2 windows on the front and a thatched roof. The front door was solid oak with a white wooden frame. It had a whitewashed wooden patio outside with a garden filled with the most beautiful flowers Naruto thought of. Naruto started over to the small cottage, wiping his brow as he went. Creating all of this had been a tireless job, but he was glad to do it. Akane was innocent of any wrongdoings. After all, it wasn't her fault she had been controlled, though Naruto still suspected she blamed herself and he hoped he could make her see it wasn't her fault. Opening the door to the cottage, Naruto stepped in and admired his work for a moment. The flooring was solid wood with a polished finish. The walls were a warm pale orange color. As he stepped into the small open-plan single floor, the kitchen was over to the right, and all the utilities were solid oak with a white marble countertop. There were a sink and stove all set up and a fully stocked fridge. To the left there was an open-plan living room with a number of sofas and recliners with a stove against the wall where they all circled it and it was burning welcomingly. Though looking around, Naruto could see Akane anywhere inside. He knew she wasn't outside, so because she said she had something inside to give him when he was finished, so there was only one other place where she could be. Naruto started over to the left side of the cottage and the small hallway that led to the single bedroom and bathroom that took up the far left-hand side of the house. Coming to the door, Naruto stopped and knocked twice before waiting for a reply. "Come in, Naruto-sama," Akane called through the door. She had insisted on calling him that regardless of Naruto's attempts to get her to do so otherwise. Hearing her call him, he opened the door and walked in. The interior was designed to how she had requested it. The room was a large square painted a fierce warm fiery red with slightly lighter petal designs on it, like cherry blossom petals falling from their trees. The far wall had a large crystal stained glass window which let the sunlight fill the room, and in the center was a large queen-size bed with a hanging canopy above it, with a pure white quilt and pillows, and in the middle sat Akane in the seiza position, wearing the white kimono with black trimmings that Naruto had made for her on request. Closing the door, Naruto smiled to her. "All finished, Akane-chan, I hope you like it." Akane opened her eyes and gave Naruto a warm smile back. "Yes, it is more that I could ever ask for, Naruto-sama, thank you," she said as she got up from the bed and took out a red scroll from inside her sleeve. The main body was red with black edges and it had an old wicker body. Naruto blinked as he looked at the scroll. He didn't remember making that. "Akane-chan, where did that scroll come from? You didn't have it before all of this, I'm sure of that. She was only wearing rags before, so where had she hidden it?" Akane smiled as she held out the scroll for him. "It's a special scroll, Naruto-sama, one that only I can summon wherever I am. It's the contract for the fox summons. I'm its guardian as the strongest of the foxes, the Kyubi. That name is only a title, and because of this the foxes have never had a summoner," she said as she handed the scroll. "I wish for you to have the honor of being our first summoner, Naruto-sama." Naruto looked at the scroll, surprised at the sudden offer. he had read about summoning. All of the greatest shinobi had them, and even the clans of Konoha had them. The Uchihas had the crow and raven contracts. The Sarutobis had the monkeys. The legendary Sannin each had their own Tsunade. The legendary medic and granddaughter to the first Hokage and grandniece to the second held the slug contract. The toad Sannin Jiraiya held the toad contract, which was also the one his father had used. And then Orochimaru had the snake contract, which Anko also had signed. There were a number of other contracts floating about, but the chances of him signing one of them before he even became a shinobi were near impossible, and there were some that the Hokage had sealed away in his vault as they were deemed too dangerous to allow average shinobi to sign. It was law that any contract found on a mission was to be turned over to the Hokage, and he would decide whether or not it could be signed by the one who found it and them allowed to keep it or sealed away with reward given for its retrieval. Looking at the scroll, another thought hit him and his eyes went wide. Akane-chan, if I signed this, then couldn't I technically summon you out of this seal into the physical work? Akane nodded with a smile. Partially yes, you could, although the seal will still keep me linked to you. If you die, I die, and keep 7 of my 9 tails worth of power sealed within you. I'd have as much chakra as 20 Jonin shinobi, and the seal would pull me back inside after 5 hours or so. Naruto frowned, hearing that he had thought he had found a way to get her free of the seal, but he would still do that. This would just be a temporary solution. He nodded to her. That will have to do for now. Now where do I sign? He said as he opened the scroll and saw the long slots for his signature and the smaller space for his fingerprints. Knowing what to do, he put his finger to his mouth as he channeled chakra into his teeth before drawing blood. He signed his full name and then covered each fingertip in blood before pressing them in the space and closing the scroll back up before handing it back to Akane. She took it smiling. Thank you for accepting, Naruto-sama. Naruto smiled back. Of course, I would, Akane-chan, and if it's a step closer to getting you out of here, I'd do anything. Akane smiled at his passion, but slowly it faded to a frown before she spoke. Naruto-sama, if I may ask a question, why are you doing all this? After all, she started, but Naruto cut in. Because I don't blame you at all, Akane-chan. I don't blame you for any of it. And you shouldn't have to suffer for what you didn't do. That's something I know all too well, Naruto said as he began to frown. Akane's hair shaded her eyes as she looked to the ground. I'm sorry, that was all she started again. No, it wasn't, Naruto snapped. None of it was, he said, putting his hands on her shoulders. Nothing that happened to me was your fault. I wish you could see that you did nothing wrong. He said as she looked up into his eyes. It was because of you that I survived. You healed me after each attack, after each beating. It was you who saved me and healed my wounds. You couldn't protect me, so you took away my pain as best you could. I owe you so much, Akane-chan. Akane's eyes began to water hearing his words. They shattered what resolve she had left, and she wrapped her arms around Naruto and started crying into his chest. Naruto wrapped his arms around her smaller form and held her, whispering soothing words into her ear as he ran his hand through her beautiful crimson hair. One thing he hadn't noticed before was how small she was. He stood at a reasonable 5'7", but she was at least half a foot shorter than him. He took in a breath and smelled the raspberry scent from her hair. She had said it was her favorite fruit, and now realizing how close the two of them were, he could feel her smaller form trembling. He held her tightly as she cried into him, and it was like that for a few minutes until that she began to calm down, and a noticeable blush came on her face, realizing how close they both were. Naruto saw the blush and gave a slightly amused smirk. He had seen the same blush on Anko when he beat her at her teasing game, and a thought occurred to him, could she have similar feelings? Looking down at her, he had to admit she was beautiful, though slightly on the smaller side compared to Anko. But then she was younger. She had explained that when she was sealed in him that his age affected her human form, and that was why she looked like she did, but Naruto honestly liked how she looked. Her form was small but not malnourished. She had a rather slimming figure with slender arms that were just muscular enough to still look feminine, and she had a chest that would give Anko a run for her money. And her crimson hair was absolutely stunning. Combined with the blush she was currently sporting, she looked adorable. Akane-chan, Naruto said as he brushed her hair behind her ear, making her tremble at his touch and her blush deepen. Why are you shaking? He asked in a teasing tone. He felt her immediately tense at his words. NN Naruto-sama, she said, her blush getting even deeper still. She almost was all red like her hair as she tried not to look into his eyes. With a slightly wicked smile, Naruto took her chin and gently tilted her head upwards till they were both looking eye to eye, her looking into his cerulean blue eyes, and he into her deep red eyes that held so much beauty behind them. Akane-chan, please be truthful with me, do you have feelings for me? Naruto asked, his voice gentle and soothing. Akane found herself relaxing more and more hearing it, as she slowly started to tear up before she buried her into Naruto's chest. I do, Akane cried out, but I know I don't deserve to. After everything I've done, how you ever return them? I just couldn't stop myself from feeling like this, watching you your entire life growing up in such hell. I love you, Naruto-sama, with all my being, not out of pity but admiration. You took everything they did to you, and you never broke, you came through stronger for it, and yet the pain you suffered was because of me. I don't deserve these feelings, but at the same time I know I deserve the pain of loving you but never being with you, and watch others have you instead. Hearing her weeping confession, Naruto couldn't help but feel happy, but at the same time sad. Happy because she felt that way about him, but sad at the fact that she hadn't confessed because she saw it as a way of repentance and further punishment for something she had no control over. Well, that ends now, Naruto thought to himself before he wrapped her arms around her smaller form and held her tight as she cried, and he rubbed her back letting her cry out her pain as he rocked her back and forth letting her know he was there for her. Akane-chan, please stop punishing yourself for all of this, you did nothing wrong, and anything you think you've done against me I've already forgiven you for and you have more than paid your repentance for. Please Akane-chan, you say you're doing this to pay for causing me pain when in reality seeing you in pain is causing me more pain than anything those villagers could have ever done to me, Naruto pleaded in a low voice. Slowly Akane stopped crying and looked into Naruto's eyes, his arms holding her safe and caringly. Naruto-sama, she said in a small voice, unsure what to say as one of his hands slowly came to her face brushing her hair out of the way and slowly caressed her cheek. She pressed into his warmth and closed her eyes. You've looked out for me all my life, healed my wounds, saved me from my suffering, and have seen me in my lowest hour. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something for you as well, Naruto said as he caressed her cheek, feeling her soft skin on his. I would gladly give you all the comfort and bliss for all you have given me, my sweet Aka-chan. Opening her eyes, Akane had a clouded look over them. She had never imagined she could feel the way she did now, or that Naruto would have ever accepted her confession. Slowly her face moved closer to his as she yearned for one thing. Their lips grew closer and closer. She closed her eyes as they were about to touch, but the feeling was gone when she felt his finger come to her lips. Her eyes opened with slight shock and disappointment as she looked to Naruto again. His eyes were sad for having to deny her as he shook his head. I'm sorry Aka-chan, we can't, not yet. I promised Anko that she would have to approve any girl who wanted to be with me until she gives you the yes. We can't, Naruto said with a small frown. Akane frowned as well before she hugged Naruto, her head resting on his chest. It's alright Naruto-sama, I can wait. I know Anko-san is a reasonable girl and we share the same love, just promise me you won't make me wait longer than I have to. Naruto smiled as he hugged her back and sighed contently. I promise Aka-chan, I promise. Flashback end. With the Hokage's go-ahead, Naruto nodded and turned, walking to the center of the room before raising his hand as he channeled chakra into one of his teeth, sharpening it as he pricked his left thumb before smearing it on his right palm and starting to cycle through the hand signs, before raising his right hand and calling out, Kuchio's no Jutsu, Kyubi. His hand hit the ground and all the counselors' eyes widened, hearing him as the summoning diagram spread out from his hand and then erupted in a large plume of smoke. Everyone tensed, expecting the smoke to clear, showing the nightmare that had attacked the village 16 years prior. But instead, as the smoke cleared, there was no fox, only a young teenage girl with long crimson hair in a crimson-red kimono with a black trimmings and sash. The only evidence that she was different were the 9 tails that were coming out from the base of her spine and her slit red eyes that promised pain to her enemies. Seeing what had just happened, the civilian side acted as you would have expected. They freaked. The QB is free. Quickly kill the monster before it can escape. The demon brat had doomed us all. Hiruzen clenched his fists and was about to silence them with his ki when someone beat him to the punch. Akane's fists clenched in a force that felt like 1,000 deaths washed over the entire room, making the civilians pale and shut up as the pressure mounted on them from the girl. You're the monsters. Akane roared in anger. You call me a monster, after all that you have done. She continued, her eyes glowing red in anger as her teeth turned to fangs. The things I have witnessed from my seal, things not even demons would do, attacking a child. You bastards make me sick. If it weren't for Naruto-sama, I would destroy you and this Kami-forsaken village for what you have done. Not even the Shinigami would devour your souls for fear of poisoning himself with your stupidity and cowardice. The clan heads were brought into shock at the sudden outburst. They were aware that Naruto had been treated poorly because of his status as Jinchuriki, but this had been the first any of them had heard of attacks. Tsume's claws were starting to grow as her anger grew. Hiashi was doing his best to restrain himself from activating his Byakugan, and Inoichi was clenching his fists as they realized there was more kept from them than they had realized as they looked to the Hokage as his eyes were shaded over by his hat, his anger only visible by the slowly splintering arms of his chair as he gripped them with his hands. As he remembered each of the times Naruto had been brought to his office, the last time had been one of the tamer attacks and Anko had stopped it before it had gone further. Naruto placed his hand on Akane's shoulder to calm her down. Feeling his hand, she understood and slowly brought her ki down as she calmed down. Akane-san, Tsume spoke through gritted teeth as she tried to contain her rage. What do you mean attacking a child? Akane turned to look at Tsume. She could hear the anger in her voice as her own slowly settled down and frowned before she answered and looked to Naruto for permission to tell them. Naruto's eyes were shadowed by his hair, but he gave a single nod of the head subtly to go ahead. With a frown, Akane nodded back as her fists began to clench, keeping herself in check before speaking. I'm referring to the savage attacks that Naruto-sama suffered for years, because of these stupid, blind, ignorant civilians. Why he still wants to stay here I do not truly know. I have pleaded with him over the past 4 years just to leave. There is not a street in this village that he was not chased down by mobs to be caught and beaten till near death. The things Naruto-sama has suffered under the monsters in this village, I would not wish on my worst enemies or even the worst criminals. Even some of the things done to him most criminals wouldn't have done out of human decency. Hiashi was infuriated as he steadied his breathing before speaking, not sure if he wanted his answer, but he had to know the extent. Akane-san, to what was the extent of these attacks? He asked as he tried to maintain his stoic expression with only a little disgust showing through. Akane's teeth clenched as she tried to keep herself calm at the same time as fighting back tears from remembering the worst of the nights. Focusing more on the anger to save her dignity, she snarled slightly. You mean how they crucified him to a wall with kunai and processed burn him alive, hung him off a tree by his ankles and used him as target practice for kunai or shuriken, cut his fingers off, run him through with katanas, spears, gouged, burned and ripped his eyes and tongue out, before piercing his eardrums, before tossing him into a river, all before he was 6 years old. Akane said, finished in a yell, her control long gone. Enough. Tsume yelled, not being able to take it anymore, her anger overpowered by her maternal pain and shame of not having stopped this, of having failing her dearest friend and godchild, as she began to break down in tears. The sight of which disturbed the other clan heads. Tsume was one of the hardest women in the village. She was the one who drove people to tears before they wet themselves and cried for mercy, which she rarely gave. To see her in tears was something none of them expected. Naruto quickly moved to his new godmother's side as she pulled him into an embrace while pleading with him to forgive her for not being there and praying for Kushina to forgive her for not protecting him as she should have. Naruto had returned the hug and was telling her there was nothing to forgive as he tried to hold back his own tears at having a family that wanted him. The moment was interrupted by a rather fat and stupid civilian who had managed to finally snap out of his scared state. Traitor, you demon-loving whore. The man had started to yell only to be silenced once and for all as his head fell from his shoulders and smoke rose up from the man's neck as the wound had been cauterized due to the red chakra around Akane's hand, who was now standing behind the collapsing corpse of the dead man. The only demon around here is me, and you'd be best to remember that. Akane yelled, making the civilians cry out in terror of the Kyuubi killing someone. But everything came to a screeching halt when the Hokage unloaded his ki for the first time that meeting in a higher concentration than before, making each of the civilians nearly wet themselves in fear. That is enough. Hiruzen yelled out as his anger finally came to the boiling point. All civilians will sit down and shut up, or so help me Kami, I'll have each of you worthless bastards executed for breaking the law I passed 16 years ago, which I have heard each of you break in years past. The paperwork for the executions, I'll kill each of you myself. The civilians quickly retook their seats in fear of the Hokage making good on his threats, though some were sitting uncomfortably after emptying their bowels in their pants, and there was a rather unpleasant smell while two Anbu started spraying the floor down with low-power water jutsu and spraying some air freshener until after the meeting. Hiruzen cleared his throat. Now, Akane-san, you have been called here to attest to the events that happened that night 16 years ago. Can you present any evidence to confirm the fact that you were under genjutsu? Hi, I can. The written testimony of my previous container, Kushina Uzumaki, and Naruto's father in the form of 2 letters which you gave to Naruto-sama 4 years ago. It would be all the proof I need. However, I ask that only you and the clan heads read them, because these civilian bastards don't deserve the privilege of touching 2 of Naruto-sama's most treasured possessions. Akane finished spitting at the civilians with disgust. Hiruzen nodded. I will respect that request, and I will look over the letters on a later date and confirm them in another meeting. If any of the clan heads wish to read their contents, I will arrange that also. It will also confirm without a doubt of Naruto's heritage and that he is Kushina's son. Tsume and Naruto finally broke their hug as Tsume looked to the Hokage with a fire in her eyes, one of anger directed at the old man. With all due respect, Hokage-sama. Why did you wait until now to reveal Naruto heritage? Wouldn't 16 years ago have been better? Slowly Hiruzen nodded, not angry with Tsume's outburst, as he understood it, as he had been cursing himself for not doing it all those years ago. Yes, revealing his heritage all those years ago could have prevented all of this, but it also could have cost Naruto his life. Kushina and Naruto's father were both heavily wanted and revered in the war, and to name him as their child would have put him under constant threat with them both gone. Then why not have let us adopt him into the clans back then? We could have protected him from any attacks. Tsume growled. She had actually pushed to take Naruto into her clan, as had many of the others, each for varying reasons, but each of their requests had been denied by the Hokage office. As much as I wanted Naruto-kun to have a family, and had I known of you being his second godmother, I would have done so in a heartbeat, but to place young Naruto in any of the clans would have been just as dangerous. Each clan lost members, and so there would have been hatred from within each of the clans. Placing him in one could have resulted from an inner assassination. If not, it would have also tipped the balance of power of the clans in favor of the chosen clan, and the others might have revolted. Adding onto that his clan heir status, it would have meant handing over the wealth and possessions that rightly belonged to Naruto. Those were my reasonings. The aging Hokage said, sounding more and more weak. I had thought that by keeping him free from the clans would have given me more ability to protect him. As a clan child, I am limited to what I can do. Given clan laws, I would have been restricted from removing him if a problem was found, and it would have been too late. By leaving him an orphan in hopes of a normal family adopting him, I was able to post guards to keep him safe or pull him from trouble should any have arisen, but with increasing demands and our numbers still recovering from the last war and then the attack, I had limited manpower, and he was left vulnerable to many times. For this, I have begged Naruto's forgiveness on many times, and I will do so many times more, and while I cannot make right the wrongs of the past, I will see they are somehow given justice for. Hiruzen said as he started getting some fight back in his voice. This seemed to scare some of the civilians as to what justice he was referring to when he meant by given justice. While the clan heads were nodding in approval, as was Naruto. Hiruzen had told Naruto about the clans trying to adopt him when he had first been born. And he had explained his reasoning just as he had now. Naruto understood that as Hokage he had to look out for everyone in the village and not show favor on any single clan or person. His father had known this also, and he wasn't angry at Hiruzen for failing to protect him. He blamed the foolish civilians for that. They were the ones who had caused the pain out of their stupidity, and now they were going to start paying for it, even if it was just a little. As of right now, all those who have had a record of any assault on Naruto are hereby ordered to pay over half their estate worth to the Uzumaki clan as recompense for crimes against the clan. Furthermore, anyone who is suspected of knowing about, partaking or had any involvement in the attacks is ordered to report to the T&I department to have their minds checked and their crimes recorded before paying the same amount. Anyone who refused to do so will be stripped of their citizenship and executed, and all of their estate will go to the Uzumaki clan, and should any of them have a second crime recorded or attempt to do so, will suffer the same fate. Hiruzen ordered. You can't do that, we have rights. Another dumb civilian yelled in outrage at this decree. Hiruzen simply waved a hand and an Anbu came out of the shadows and ran a katana through the man's head, killing him instantly, making the other civilians grow a shade paler at the death as more bowls opened and more air freshener was needed, though it wasn't doing much good at this point. I can do this, and I am. In fact, I am ordering each civilian council member to be first in line for a mind check with T&I, and each of you had better pass, as I am ordering your removal from this council should you fail, as well as the reparations to young Naruto's clan, Hiruzen said with a scowl. Hokage-sama, may I make an additional request? Naruto asked from beside Sume. Getting a nod, he continued, while we're on the subjects of reparations, one Sasuke Uchiha has stolen the workings of the Uzumaki Kaiden, Kasai Hakushu no Jutsu, and used it without permission in his Genin graduation test as his final jutsu. Under clan law, I demand compensations are made for the stolen jutsu from the Uchiha clan, and whoever gave him the knowledge of the justice workings pay as well. The only other people who knew of its workings were the counselors in this room, and I highly doubt any of the clan heads would do such a thing as to pass on a jutsu without source of its origins. I request that it be an additional topic in the mind search by T&I. Hearing the request, Hiruzen nodded. By my order, reparations will be made for the stolen jutsu of the Uzumaki clan and by the Uchiha clan, and the culprit will be found and pay as well. No sooner had Hiruzen said that there was a loud bang at the door of the council room door, making everyone look to it as two Anbu dropped down katana as the ready to defend the room before the next hit burst the door open, revealing a very ally frustrated Anko. Naruto. Anko yelled as the doors flew open. I said 1 hour, it's been 3, you know what that means. Naruto gulped slightly while he knew he was stronger than Anko. She was rather scary when she didn't get her fun time or dango and ramen, and right now she was walking over with him in her sights, a Senbon needle with a dangerous glare on her face that was scaring most men in the room. Naruto quickly raised his hands. Anko-chan, please let me explain, it wasn't my fault. I was planning to come right home, but then all this happened and I couldn't get out of it, he said very quickly as she was coming ever closer. Akane-chan, a little help here. Naruto yells in a last-ditch attempt to save his balls. Akane quickly rushed over to beside Naruto. Anko-chan, Naruto-sama is telling the truth, he was doing his best to get back to you, but the dumb civilians just wouldn't let him go. Anko completely ignored her as she got to Naruto and grabbed him by his shirt collar. I don't care. I just want you to shut up. Get home and me already. The second Anko said that all the male clan heads and civilian males pinch their noses to keep from fainting due to blood loss, Hokage included. Sume just burst out laughing. Ha 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 ha, and I thought the females in my clan were bad when they're in heat, ha 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 ha. One of the civilian women pointed at Anko. Do you have any shame, you snake whore? she said before she found her head rolling along the ground just like the first dumb counselor as Akane walked back over to Naruto and Anko. Like the Hokage said, your lives are already forfeit for breaking his law. No one cares if you die, so it would be wise to watch your tone should I decide to just end you for talking ill of Anko-chan, Akane said with a dangerous glare making the civilians shiver as they each felt a warm stream flowing down their legs. Naruto shook his head slightly. Hokage-sama, can we please wrap this up already, before we run out of civilian counselors for this meeting, and I pass out from the smell of shit in this room cause of these fools who can't control their bowels. Is that what that stink is? Kami, that's bad. Anko yelled as she smelled it too. Hiruzen, who was covering his mouth and nose, nodding. I second that, Naruto. Alright, let's hurry up. I move for the reinstatement of the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, and move for the immediate vote of the clan heads. Civilians have no say in clan matters. The Yamanaka clan supports the reinstatement of the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, Inoichi says as he stands up. The Nara clan supports the reinstatement of the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, Shikaku said lazily as he did the same. The Akamichi clan supports the reinstatement of the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, Choza declared standing up beside his teammates. The Hyuga clan supports the reinstatement of the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, Hiyashi said proudly as he stood up. To hell with what the elders wanted, he would support his friend's son. The Aburame clan supports the reinstatement of the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, Shibi said plainly as he stood up, but then that was the normal for an Aburame, not very passionate guys. The Inazuka clan supports the reinstatement of the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, Sum said proudly with a feral grin. She'd be damn sure to do everything possible with Naruto now that she knows what the score was, and she would help him however she could to make up for the lost time. Hiruzen nodded. Then it is official, the Uzumaki clan is reinstated in Konoha and its sole member is placed under the Clan Restoration Act. Naruto Uzumaki, you are to appoint a representative to speak for your clan on the council until you are 18 or Chunin. Do you have anyone in mind? He asked looking to Naruto. Naruto nodded. I request that until I'm Chunin, that Sum Inazuka speaks for the Uzumaki clan in council matters if she accepts. Sum nodded back. I accept the position, she announced proudly. Hiruzen nodded, and with that, the remainder of this meeting is postponed until a later date as it doesn't stink of the civilian council's fecal matter, he said getting up. Anko grinned and grabbed Naruto's arm. You. Me. Senseless. Now, she said as she began pulling him towards the door, making the men grateful they're already pinching their noses cause of the smell, and Sum smirk. Good luck to you, Naruto. Something's telling me your mother is smiling down on you now and your father is laughing for finding a woman who's nearly as horny as Kushina was. Akane giggled watching Anko drag Naruto away, before calling after them, Anko-chan, remember our deal, she called with a growing blush before poofing and returning to the seal. Leaving several Anbu groaning as they started clearing up the dead bodies and the feces off the floor. Something was telling them this would be the norm after every council meeting from now on. Traveling back to the apartment was a complete blur for Naruto as he let himself be dragged, knowing how horny Anko was at that moment. He could practically smell the pheromones oozing out of her. She wanted him bad, and after 4 years who could blame her? Naruto knew her too well, and after he had from the age of 10 reading the Ika Ika collection that was left on his doorstep for his birthday, he was all too well versed in the art of making love. Well, as far as one can be after 6 years of reading and 4 years of messing around with your girlfriend. Bursting through the door of the apartment, Naruto suddenly found himself airborne as Anko had literally thrown him in the second the door was open while she closed the door and activated the security and one-way privacy seals. When she turned back around, Naruto could see the hunger in her eyes as she slowly stalked over to him, swaying her hips back and forth as she slowly sloped her shoulders and her trench coat fell to the floor, leaving her in her skirt, mesh suit and wrappings. Gulping slightly, he knew what was coming. He'd kept her waiting and now she was going to do the same to him. He could handle it for a little while, but the question he was thinking was how was she going to do it? She wasn't a member of the T&I department for nothing. and that fact alone made him a little nervous. He had seen what was left of some of the prisoners who she had been given leeway in interrogations with, and what was left over couldn't even be called corpse, that would imply it resembled a body instead of a hunk of bone and meat. As Anko got closer to Naruto, she slipped off her shinobi sandals and loosened her wrappings as she got down on her knees and started to prowl over to Naruto, who was still on his backside, having been mesmerized by the show of her undressing. As she moved, the bindings on her S that had been loosened started to slip off, revealing she wasn't wearing a bra underneath the mess suit, as it hugged her every curve. "Foxy-kun, you kept me waiting," Anko said in a very seductive voice as Naruto's eyes remained fixated on her swaying S, and didn't notice she had started to raise his shirt as she slipped a piece of paper out from below her mess suit. "And now it's time to pay the piper," she said before placing the paper just above his waistline and channeled chakra into it a split second before pulling it away, revealing a black circle with the kanji for flow on it with a line through it. Feeling the sudden chakra, he looked down and immediately recognized the seal, and mentally cursed under his breath. It was the level 1 seal the uni prisons used for their long-term inmates. It kept the men from coming so to prevent pregnancies in the prison. The level 2 version of the seal kept men from getting erect period and was used for the more disgruntled prisoners as a punishment, and could only be removed by a series of hand seals that are an extremely high burst of chakra, which Naruto could do, but voted against it, seeing as he knew Anko could use a more painful method to achieve the same goal. There was a reason why she was the punishment in the T&I department for any shinobi who violated or was accessed of UAL harassment, and she was good and proud of her work. "That's just mean, Harem," Naruto pouted with a sigh, making Anko giggle as she leant in close to his ear. "So was making me wait 3 hours for you. Now you're going to wait for at least 1 before I let you," she said before she'd up his neck, making him growl as she got to his ear. "Now, me." Naruto grinned and immediately grabbed her thighs and used his chakra and leg strength to immediately lift them both up, making Anko eep at the sudden movement as she found herself with her legs now wrapped around Naruto's waist and his hand on her, squeezing hard, making her gasp at the roughness. He knew exactly how to push her buttons. With pleasure, Naruto growled as he started towards the bedroom and kicked the door open, and like she had done before, threw her onto the bed as she landed with a bounce. Anko's eyes immediately went to him as she got her bearings as he started towards her, as he pressed his right arm to his left shoulder and channeled chakra into the storage seal he had on it as his shirt and trench coat seal away inside it, leaving him in just his trousers, letting Anko see his bare chest and refined muscles. She could feel herself getting even more wetter at the sight as her climbed onto the bed before moving and claiming her lips as he loomed over her. His kisses had always been loving and passionate, with a slight dominating side as he claimed her, but this kiss was more passionate and dominating as he forced her to the bed as she ed into his mouth and then gasped as his hands went to her chest and with a rip freed her S from her mess clothing before he grabbed them both roughly and started squeezing, making her toes curl. He knew how she likes it. Rough, but not brutally. Hard, but not abusive. After a few moments their kiss broke apart, leaving Anko panting, wanting more, until she ed as Naruto gripped both her S and give them a slight twist and tug, before gripping the next lowest part of her mess attire and tripped it off with a pull, leaving her with just some coverage on her lower thighs and some hanging on her shoulders and arms, as she was left in just her panties lying beneath him as he began trailing kisses down her neck and over her S, leaving a trail of hickeys in his wake. Knowing she loved the feeling, he trailed down her toned flat stomach and got to her now soaking wet panties and didn't stop as he put his lips on her covered lower lips and ed, making Anko's eyes widen as her hips jerked, pushing herself closer to his lips as he ed the juices through the thin silk fabric. With her hips off the bed, Naruto gripped the waistband of her underwear and started pulling them down her thighs. He was tempted to rip them off her, but knew he'd pay for it later if her did. The silk ones were her favorite ones. She didn't mind him ripping the mess suits cause they were cheap and she had supply of them, but silk was expensive and for the quality she had, even B-rank mission pay barely covered it. Moving his lips back from her panties, he quickly pulled them from her, revealing her soaking cunt just begging to be ed. He pulled the panties off her legs and tossed them to the side before he renewed his assault on her lower lips, making her squeal with pleasure. She kept herself neatly shaven with only a small patch of pubic hair, as she had asked Naruto how he'd like her a year prior, and now it was tickling his nose somewhat as he laughed at her cunt. I need you. Now, Anko panted. After 4 years Naruto could bring her to orgasm with only his tongue, and she knew he could, but this time they were going the whole 9 yards, or in Naruto's case 9 inches. Naruto smirked and nodded as he moved back and undid the buckle on his pants and pulled them and his boxers down as his shaft stood to attention, and he started over to her, leaning over her with his arms on either side of her between her legs, missionary position, as he lined himself up with her and slowly pushed forward as he began entering her. Anko flinched slightly as he moved into her, never having used anything more than her fingers or Naruto's tongue, given that she had wanted to give herself to him and not risk it, but now she was slightly starting to regret it as she felt him fill her more and more. After a few moments, Naruto stopped as he felt her barrier and knew what was coming next would be painful for her. She may have enjoyed some slight pain, but from what he had read, this wouldn't be enjoyable. He lowered himself down to her and kissed her lips gently. Here we go, Anko-chan, it will be over in a moment. Anko had to smile. She was 2 years older than him. It was her meant to be saying those types of things to him, not the other way around, but it was nice. It was a way of showing her he cared. She was sure most men would have just lined up and shoved in without any thought, without making sure she was ready. Not she hadn't been, but Naruto was different. He was kind, caring, compassionate, and she loved him for those, and she also knew that they both had the same compatible kinks, which would make all the times after this even more enjoyable. Go ahead, she said with a nod, and Naruto nodded back before he bends his knees slightly to get a better position and then thrust through. Anko's eyes clenched in the pain as he broke through and filled her as a single tear trailed down her cheek. Naruto kissed it away and gave her sweet and gentle butterfly kisses up and down her neck as she adjusted to his size. Seeing her no longer in pain, Naruto started to move slowly and at a steady pace so as not to hurt Anko more. She was so warm and his instincts were telling him to go faster, but he wanted the first time to be special. If she asked for more, he'd give it to her as he kept his rhythm. Slowly the pain turned to pleasures as Anko started moving her hips to meet Naruto thrust as she enjoyed the pleasure. More please, faster, harder, more. Naruto-kun, she pleaded, trying desperately to get more pleasure. With a smile, Naruto gladly gave her it as he picked up his speed as her ing grew and her mules of pleasure increased, and Naruto loved each of them. Hearing her had always been one of his secret pleasures. They let him know how much she was enjoying the pleasure he was giving her, and this was just the beginning as she asked over and over for more. As he reveled in her warmth, it was the best feeling he had ever had, eating ramen and dango coming a close second. And it wasn't long until he heard the words he had been waiting for. I'm coming, bust that seal and come with me. Anko screamed as she felt her peak coming, and Naruto grinned hearing it as he did just that, and the seal faded away, and he increased his thrusts as she screamed out in bliss as he buried himself balls deep before emptying himself into her as they both hit their peaks. Naruto pulled out and dropped to Anko's side as they both panted, getting their breath back. Anko rolled over onto Naruto's chest and hugged him as they rested and basked in the glow of their first time, well, at least for 10 minutes before Anko looked to Naruto with a seductive smirk. You up for round 2, Foxy-kun? She grinned, making Naruto laugh. Oh, you know it, hubby Haim, he said before in a burst of chakra-enhanced speed. Anko found herself pressed hard against the far wall of the room and Naruto behind her, and faster than she could react he was buried in her balls deep once again, making her silently scream in pleasure as he leaned in close to her ear and whisper in a low growl. And this time I'm not holding back. Those words were the last she heard, cause after that all that anyone who entered that apartment heard would have been the sounds of Anko's screams of pleasure and gasps of pleasurable pain as Naruto gave her the ing he had promised over and over again. Time skip 4 hours later. Anko was lying over the end of her and Naruto's bed, hair in the air as she gasped, trying to get her breath back after Naruto had pounded her senseless, her was red and in a pleasurable pain after she had teased Naruto a bit too much, evident by the number of broken ping-pong paddles on the ground. They had been the cheap kind and Naruto had been for the warm-up for the paddle, which was now on Naruto's lap as he sat leaned against the far wall getting his breath back after the last round they had just finished going. Getting his breath back again, he got to his feet slightly wobbly, but after a few seconds of running chakra through his muscles, he was back and ready to go again. Anko pushed up off of the bed looking back at him with a grin. Up for round 15, she grinned, shaking hair at him with a smirk telling him she hadn't had enough just yet. Naruto laughed and was about to go for her again when the doorbell rang, making Anko snarl. Whoever that is better have a damn good reason, otherwise I'm going to give him a snake enema for interrupting our time. Naruto shook his head and moved to the door, but not before giving the paddle a finally hard swing across Anko's backside, making her drop to the bed once again. I'll go see who it is. You go start putting some cooling cream on that of yours, otherwise you won't last 5 minutes in the next round. He grinned, walking as he tied on a dressing gown and pulled on some boxers and slacks. Getting to the front door, he deactivated the seals and opened the door to be greeted by the rare sight of a Hyuga branch member. Wearing the usual white and black robes with his forehead covered. Now Naruto was really grateful he had those seals active. The seals prevented even the Hyuga dojutsu from seeing through the walls of the flat, which was one of the reasons he had installed them himself for all-around privacy. Those eyes were, as Shikamaru would put it, troublesome. Good evening, Hyuga-san, and what can I do for you this fine evening? Naruto asked with a smirk. He had a small guess what this was about. Uzumaki-sama, your presence has been requested by both the clan heads of the Hyuga and Yamanaka clans at the Hyuga compound at your earliest convenience. I'm to escort you when you're ready, the man said, not breaking his stoic demeanor. Naruto looked at him for a moment. He hadn't been expecting a summons from Inoichi as well. That was unexpected. He knew Ino had feeling for him and he returned them on some level, and with his newly elected clan status and his position in the CRA, he knew he would be getting some marriage proposals, but he never expected them this quick. Thank you, Hyuga-san. If you'd give me a few minutes, I just need to grab a quick shower and a change of attire. Would you mind waiting out here? Naruto asked politely. He had never been one for inviting strangers into his home, and a Hyuga was definitely not on his list to do so. They could read a book without even opening it, and not all his notebooks had privacy seals on them. He would have to find a way to fix that. Of course, Uzumaki-sama, the Hyuga said with a small bow, still not showing any emotion other than a stoic one. That had always been perplexing to Naruto. He had never once seen a branch Hyuga member even crack a smile, and he had made it his own personal mission 2 years ago to get them to show some other emotion, but so far all of his attempts had been unsuccessful. Oh, are you going out, Foxy-kun? Came a voice behind Naruto, but what about round 15? Naruto turned and blinked at what he saw. Anko was dressed in a small white dress shirt which cut off above her belly button and was wearing a really short skirt that just covered her underwear and no more, and had a lollipop sticking out of her mouth while holding the paddle Naruto had had moments ago. The scene made Naruto smirk. She had found his gift then. Suddenly there was a crash behind him and he looked out to see the Hyuga member was gone. He stepped out and looked over the railing to find the Hyuga branch member lying in the bushes with a look of bliss on his face and 2 trails of blood coming down his nose, making Naruto face palm. So itching power, whoopee cushions, paintballs, Anbu dress in pink tutus, and even the Hokage monument covered in orange and red paint doesn't make them laugh or break their shell, but Anko in a schoolgirl uniform does. Well, at least we have one thing in common. Naruto though, before going back inside, closing the door and looking at his very naughty schoolgirl Anko. He walked over and pulled her into a kiss which lasted 5 seconds before he pulled away. Forgive me, Anko-chan, but I've got a summons from Hiashi and Inoichi. I think it's about Ino and Hinata. This could be what we've been waiting for. Anko pouted, but it was only made wire by her clothing. Fine, I guess I can let you go for an hour, seeing as it could mean I get 2 harem sisters out of it, she said with a smirk before pointing the paddle at Naruto. But if you're not back in 1 hour, and using this on me, I'll be using it on you, got it? She said in a mock threatening tone. She knew she could never do it, but she would give it her damn best shot. Naruto smirked and kissed her again. Love you to hubby Haim, he said before he rushed off to get showered and dressed for the meeting. Scene break. Naruto walked through the streets following the Hyuga member as they headed to the Hyuga clan compound. Naruto had decided to go with a more respectable clan attire now that he had prepared for when his clan would be made official in Konoha once again. He was wearing a deep orange-brown male kimono with under wrapping and a dark blue haori with the Uzumaki crest in white on the back and his mother's sword at his waist, wearing white foot wrappings and traditional sandals. Looking like a respectable clan figure, Hiruzen had told him of his clan's traditional colors and they had the attire made to order years ago by Daichi. It was high quality and was reinforced with the same seals as his coat was. The Hyuga had been quite the whole walk and had only spoken in an apology for his composure when Naruto had come out of the apartment once more. As they walked, Naruto began to notice something. A lot of the civilians were looking at him a little bit differently. Instead of hate, some were looking at him with slight respect, others with fear, though there were still those who glared at him with hate. He was curious as to just what was doing it. That was answered when they passed by two Inuzuka clan members and the partners who noticed him and bowed respectfully. Good afternoon, Uzumaki-sama, before they walked on. And that's when Naruto realized, word had been spread about the reinstatement of the Uzumaki clan and him as clan head. Well, it was certainly an expected change and a lot of the looks he had been getting now made sense. He was getting respect due to his status changed. The looks of fear were people worried about him deciding to take his revenge on them for their past actions against him due to his position as clan head or at the time of clan heir. Any actions against him were an act of war against the Uzumaki clan, and now as clan head he could put forward for their immediate execution should he so desire. But that wasn't what Naruto had planned. No, he would let them stew in their fear with the knowledge that he could end them at any second and let them fear him the rest of his lives, as no doubt they would all soon be receiving summons from Ibiki to report for evaluations to see if they fall under the Hokage's decree of reparations to his clan. But if word about that had gotten out, then there would no doubt that the word of him being able to summon Akane out and that ease in contact with her. There would be hardcore QB haters out for him now, so he'd best be on his guard. He grips his mother's katana at the thought, looking around just begging for someone to try something. Now the two of them were coming up on the clan compound. Coming up to the front entrance, the gate opens and branch member steps to the side. Please go inside. Uzumaki-sama, Hiashi-sama and Yamanaka-sama are waiting for you in the main house, he said, giving a small bow which Naruto returned before going into the compound. Once inside, the view was quite spectacular. Fresh green grass with beautiful flower beds, a pebbled path walkway up to the main house. There was even a small pond in the middle of the compound with fresh water koi swimming in it with a small waterfall feeding into it. Bamboo trees followed one side of the path around the edge of the inner compound, and Naruto could see two sets of Hyuga guards on patrol walking the perimeter 200 meters apart. The compound was massive. Looking to his right, he could see the main house, which was a traditional style with a single floor, while behind it, he could see a number of houses. This was the main branch compound, where the head families lived. The branch members lived in a separate compound just across from this one. Naruto had known this cause he had been there a number of times to try to get one to crack a smile, and the side branch compound was nowhere near as nice as the main branch compound. Turning and starting down the path to the main house, he went to the front door and it was opened by another branch member. Please come in. Uzumaki-sama, Hiashi-sama and Yamanaka-sama are in the dining hall expecting you. Giving a nod, Naruto slipped off his sandals and moved them to the side before stepping inside. He followed the branch member to a sliding door. When he got on his knees just a bit behind away from the door before sliding it open and bowing, "Forgive the intrusion, Hiashi-sama, Yamanaka-sama. But Uzumaki-sama has arrived per your request. Please come in, Naruto-san," called the recognizable voice of Hiashi. Naruto nodded in thanks to the branch member before he walked in, and the branch member closed the door behind him. Naruto found both Hiashi and Inoichi at the rather large dining table, both with impressed looks on their faces seeing Naruto's new attire. "Naruto-san, I must say your attire is certainly one befitting one of your status, Inoichi complimented him. Yes, quite a step up from your usual attire, Uzumaki Dono, Hiyashi said with a nod of recognition. Thank you, Inoichi-san, Hyuga Dono. Though this attire would be more befitting for meetings involving clan affairs if I'm to assume this is why I was requested, Naruto said respectfully as he walked over to the table as Hiyashi gestured to take a seat. Hearing Naruto's tone, Inoichi smiled slightly. A wise observation, Naruto-san, and a correct one, but I think we can dispense with the formalities and titles, seeing as we know each other slight better than that given how many times we've spoken, and the matter at hand is more personal than business. Naruto nodded. I guess that much, and if we're being so informal, may I request that we skip any idle chat, not to be rude, but Anko-chan only gave me an hour to see what this was about and then get back, if not I'd fear she'd send her snakes after me, and not the small kind. Both Hiyashi and Inoichi looked at him with raised eyebrows. Inoichi was the one to speak first. Sorry Naruto, but we thought that 4 hours would have been enough time to see to Anko-san's desires. Naruto chuckled lightly. Enough to appease her maybe, but nowhere near enough to satisfy her. We've been abstinent 4 years and now that I'm fair game she's having as much of me as she can get. There's a lot of pent-up frustration, so, if we could speed this along before she gets impatient and decides to send the snakes out early, that would be great. Both Hiyashi and Inoichi paled slightly at the thought. 4 years ago Anko had been the name that struck fear into most of the civilians. They still hated her with a passion, but most wouldn't risk going near her cause of Orochimaru and the fact that if you pissed her off you have a river of poisonous snakes after you. And now she was the nightmare of the T&I and shared the second seat with Inoichi in that department, so he knew all too well what the woman was capable of. Both men looked at each other and nodded in agreement to make this quick as they both stood up and rounded to the front of Naruto before getting on their knees and bowing. Naruto, both Inoichi and I humbly request a unity between our clans, to be solidified by the marriages between you and our firstborn daughters, Hiyashi said respectfully. Both our daughters have expressed their desires for you to court you, and we believe this is the best option for our clans and our daughters, Inoichi continued. Naruto nodded hearing their requests. I will accept the unity between our clans as I already planned on requesting such myself at a later date when the construction of the Uzumaki compound begins. But I will not accept your requests, so solidify them through arranged marriages. Both Inoichi and Hiyashi looked to Naruto with slight shock before anger came to them at the thought of him turning down their daughters, but Naruto raised his hand as he continued. Let me explain. I would love nothing more than to have both Ino and Hinata as my girlfriends and in the future my wives. But to do so through arranged marriages at this moment in time would not work, for the main reason that neither of them knows about Akane or what really happened 16 years ago, and until they are told to put them into an arranged marriage with me before they know all the facts would not sit well with me. In fact, the whole concept of arranged marriages never sat well with me. I offer both your clans the unity unconditional of the marriages, and request permission to court both Hinata and Ino as my further girlfriends and wives. I will tell them all the facts before I start that level of a relationship with them so they can decide themselves without it feeling like it was forced. If they accept me and are willing, only then will I pursue a relationship like that with them, and of course any intimacy with them will wait until they are ready for such and request it. I will not make them into baby makers to restart my clan regardless of council orders. Both Inoichi and Hiyashi smiled slightly hearing Naruto's reasons, and both knew their daughters had chosen wisely in their pursuit of love. Naruto was respectful, strong, smart, caring, and would take care of both their daughters, though they still planned on being overprotective. As fathers, such was their right, but something was telling them that they wouldn't have to do so as much with Naruto as they would have anyone else. Hiyashi nodded. Your reasoning is solid, Naruto, and for this, you have our thanks. Inoichi continued. Both Hinata and Ino are in the indoor garden space in the middle of the house. If you'd like to speak with them now, I'm sure they'd love to hear you out now. Naruto stood up and gave a small bow. Thank you, I believe I will. I still have some time before I need to get back to Anko-chan. Now if you'll excuse me, he said before turning around and heading to where he could feel Ino and Hinata's chakra coming from. As he walked out, both Hiashi and Inoichi shared a look. Follow him and listen in. Inoichi asked, would we be fathers to our daughters if we didn't? Hiashi responded as he and Inoichi silently followed the blonde, wanting to hear their daughter's response to his request, both silently rooting for him. Scene break. Naruto took a slight breath, steadying his nerves before releasing slowly as he stood in front of the door leading out into the inner yard of the Hyuga main household before he reached out and opened the door and stepped out. The inner yard was a small green garden, a wooden walkway around the entire rim, and a small wooden bridge crossing the river of stone pebbles that separated the walkway from the garden. In the middle of the green garden there was a blanket laid out, and on it sat both Ino and Hinata, both giggling to themselves as they talked, but when they had heard the door open, the both looked over to see Naruto dressed in his formal attire and both blushed seeing their shared crush. Naruto smiled as he crossed the bridge over onto the inner garden seeing their blushes. Good evening you two, I hope I'm not intruding, he said with a smile on the outside, while inside he was still fighting to keep his nerves down, hoping they'd be open to what their conversation was going to lead to. No, Naruto-kun, we were just chatting, we just didn't expect to see you here, Hinata said as she tried to fight back her blush. Wow, Naruto-kun, you look amazing, any reason for the fancy clothing? Ino asked, looking him up and down, desperately trying not to her lip at the sight of him as well as fighting back her blush. Well, it's only right to attend clan meetings dressed appropriately. As of coming 5 hours ago, the Uzumaki clan has been reinstated as a formal clan of Konoha, Naruto said with a proud smile. Congratulations Naruto-kun, Hinata said in shock, happy for him. Yay, that's great, Ino said in the same tone, both knowing how much his mother's clan had meant to him. Thanks, Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head. You see, your fathers called me here so that an alliance could be made between our clans, so as the Uzumaki clan regrows it benefits all three of our clans, but that's not the reason I've come to talk to you now. What do you mean, Naruto-kun? Hinata asked as both she and Ino looked at Naruto with slight confusion as he sat down. Well, I know how you two feel about me, I have for some time now, Naruto stated as both girls blushed again at the sudden statement. The thing is, I have the same feelings for both of you, maybe not as strong as I have for Anko-chan, but they're still there, and Anko-chan and I have been together 4 years now, as I'm sure you're both aware, and it's because of that I haven't been able to act on my feelings for you two, as polyamory is frowned upon for civilians. Both girls nodded sadly. They knew Naruto had been dating Anko since before the academy, and the first day at the academy she had made it clear that anyone that tried anything would regret it, so that's why they hadn't acted either. But the thing is, now that the Uzumaki clan has been reinstated and I'm the last member, I've been placed on the CRA to restore my clan, and I'm sure you both know what that means, so I won't really go into the details. But the bottom line is Anko has agreed to share me, given I must have feelings for the other girls as well as them having feeling for me, which I think is more than reasonable, Naruto explained as he could see the blushes deepening on both girls as he talked. Though Naruto didn't know it, both girls in their heads were screaming, "Thank you, Kami." Now there is something I want to ask you both, and I'm sure you can both guess what that is, but before I ask you the question, I want to tell you some things, because I don't want you making the decision before you know all the facts just to find them out later and then regret it and end up hating me, Naruto explained, looking very serious. Both girls shared a look before looking back to Naruto and giving subtle nods to continue. Naruto nodded back before sighing. Well, I'm sure you both have noticed how when I walk around the village about 80 to 95% of the villagers don't exactly look at me with the most kindest of glares. He said, getting nods from both girls. They had always seen that and wondered why. Well, there's a reason for that. Time skip. I'm not going to repeat it, you already know it all by now. Both girls sat in silence after having listened to the one they loved telling them of his life, and the nightmare it had been. All because of how the Yondaime Hokage had chosen him to hold the Kyubi or Akane after she had attacked the village, and the villagers had viewed him as the fox, even though the truth was that it had never been her fault in the first place. They had listened to how badly Naruto had been treated and how he had only found true happiness 4 years ago when he had met Anko and had been told who his parents were, though he hadn't told them who his father was, given that it was ordered by the Hokage to remain a secret until he was Chunin. Now both sat looking at the blonde as his hair shadowed his eyes as he looked down, not wanting to meet their eyes for risk of judgment from them. Ino spoke first. Naruto-kun, you told us all this because you wanted to ask us a question, Ino started. That question was if we wanted to share you with Anko under the CRA, and you didn't want us to regret it later should we have found this out, Hinata finished. Naruto nodded, but still not meeting their eyes. Yes, I didn't want to ask you without you knowing. For that exact fact, I knew you had feelings for me, but at the same time you didn't know about my status due to the Sandame's laws. And now that you do, I can understand if neither of you wishes to be with me. Both girls looked to each other and shared small smiles before nodding. The next thing Naruto knew was that he was tackled by both Kunoichi into a hug that caught him by surprise and forced him to the ground. Naruto quickly adjusted to the new scene and looked to the girls who had just tackled him, both with smiles and loving looks in their eyes. Naruto-kun, this doesn't change how we feel about you. We could never look at you the way those Baka villagers look at you, Hinata said before hugging him as she desperately fought back her blush at being so close to Naruto 4 years and she was still trying to. Damn right it doesn't. Why should it? Akane isn't to blame, so why should it affect how we feel about you? Ino asked as she looked to Naruto. Naruto smiled before hugging both girls. Thank you, I just had to be sure. You have no idea how happy you both saying that makes me, Naruto said happily that they both still wanted him. Both girls hugged back, both with blushes on their cheeks, both unbelievably happy that the boy they had both had a crush on was returning their feelings for them both. After a few moments the hug broke apart and the three of them sat back, all with smiles on their faces. You know, I was kind of nervous about all of this, Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head, both about telling the two of you about all this and the fact that you'd both turned down the idea of sharing me. Both Ino and Hinata blushed and giggled at statement, understanding Naruto's thoughts. Not many women would agree to share a man, but then again not many men are worth sharing, but Naruto was the exception. Anyo, actually Naruto-kun, 3 years ago when Ino and myself talked and discovered each other's crushes on you, we, Hinata started but Ino cut in. We agreed that if we could both have you, we'd share, Ino said with a slight smirk on her face, even at the same time. Hearing Ino say that, Hinata blushed beet red and Naruto have a slowly growing lecherous smile as a very vivid mental image of what his future could contain came to his head. At the same time, just to the inside left of the main house door, both Hiashi and Inoichi stood listening, both with slight blushes themselves, hearing their daughters had spoken of such things, and both looked to each other and spoke quietly. Well, Ino certainly is very outgoing in her ways, Hiashi said, trying to put it politely. Inoichi cleared his throat. Well, she's always been a very outgoing girl, but I'm surprised that Hinata agreed to it. I didn't think her the type. Hiashi gave a small smile. Well, she takes after my wife in that way, I'd suspect, but she's still young, he said before they both went back to listening. Naruto cleared his throat and mind of the images. It was still too soon for some things that he was thinking of. Well, if it comes the time that's what you two want, then I won't say no, but it will still be some time before we do anything like that. If we do start dating, then we'll take it slow so we can get it right. Ino nodded in understanding and Hinata shuffled nervously on her spot slightly, which Naruto noticed. Hinata, is something wrong? He asked, worried he'd upset her. Hinata shook her head. Anyo, no, nothing's wrong, Naruto-kun. I agree with taking it slowly. It's just that if we're going to be dating, would it be alright if we? Hinata started but stopped nervously. If we what? Hinata-chan? Naruto asked, not sure what she was getting at. He didn't think she was the type for the heavy stuff straight away, and he wanted to wait, but he was opening to listening to what she wanted. If we kissed, Hinata said as she blushed red as she spoke the words. Hearing them, Ino blushed red too. Kunoichi or not, they were still teen girls who had never kissed before, and the thought of doing it with their crush now shared boyfriend was enough to make them both blush crimson. Naruto had to hold back a chuckle at how cute they both looked blushing like that. He and Anko had done much more than kiss, so the thought of kissing wasn't exactly heavy to him, but he knew that it was too soon for something major. He gave them a small smile. "If that's what you would like, Hinata-chan, I'll give you both one if you'd like," he said as he watched both their blushes deepen. "But nothing more than a small chastity kiss. I'd like to take you both out on at least one date before we do anything more," he said seriously. Even he and Anko had waited till after their first date at Ichiraku's before anything more serious. To the inside left of the door, both Inoichi and Hiashi smiled, both knowing Naruto was a gentleman but both keeping their fatherly instincts down, knowing Naruto wouldn't take it too far, and both shared a look with the other since they were in this together. "You alright with this?" Inoichi asked. Hiashi nodded. "Yes, I see no reason to intervene yet, it's just a small kiss and they've both agreed to it, let them have their moments." Naruto moved to face Hinata, who was currently blushing up a storm, being so nervous. She had asked for it and now she was going to get it. As Naruto moved to her side and they both leaned in and their lips gently touched, Hinata was doing everything in that moment not to pass out. Naruto was kissing her and she was kissing Naruto. He was being so gentle, as was everything she had imagined. Naruto couldn't help but smile mentally as he took in the experience. Her lips were so soft he could smell her scented lipstick, peach, and he caught the scent of her shampoo, lavender and grass. It was different from Anko's, but it was still nice. After a few seconds, Naruto pulled back as Hinata mewed in disappointment, wanting more, before covering her mouth in embarrassment at making the noise, making Naruto chuckle slightly. "Sorry, Haim, that's all you're getting for now," Naruto lightly teased, getting her blush to deepen yet another shade and take up her entire face before he turned to Ino, who had her own blush growing in anticipation for her own kiss. Moving over to her, Naruto smiled as he leant in as she did the same, kissing each other gently as Ino nearly melted at his touch. Naruto took in her scent as he did, noticing the difference from both Anko and Hinata. Vanilla lip gloss was what he was getting this time with a mango and passion fruit shampoo. He liked it. And once more as he pulled away after the few seconds, making sure not to give one more than the other, he got a disappointed from Ino, who like Hinata cover her mouth in embarrassment, making Naruto chuckle. Suddenly there was a cough breaking the moment as the three looked to Hiashi and Inoichi at the doorway, choosing now to break the moment. "Well, I trust you have a good reason for what we just witnessed, Naruto-san," Inoichi said in mock anger, wanting to try and bust his future son-in-law's balls slightly. "We said to talk with, then not them," Hiashi added his 2 cents as well with mock anger. But before they could continue, both felt their ear burning as found themselves pulled to one side like children by their separate daughters, who were giving their fathers unimpressed looks, one that Inoichi got often when he angered his wife and one that Hiashi hadn't gotten in years, as both Hinata and Ino spoke a single sentence. "Play nice with our boyfriend." That one phrase sent chills down both men's spines that promise untold pain to both their bodies and their coin purses should they refuse, so both quickly nodded their heads. Naruto chuckled nervously at the scene, knowing he'd be in for trouble if he angered them, but then a thought suddenly crossed his mind as he checked his watch and his eyes widened. "Crap!" he yelled before sprinting past the father and daughter couples heading for the door. "I've only got 5 minutes left before I'm late." As both Inoichi and Hiashi stood up watching the blonde blur go, he knew they had made the right choice with him for their daughters, but both silently gave a prayer for his balls if he was late, and prayed for the future of his coin purse should he take their daughters and their cravings on. Scene break. Naruto sprinted out of the Hyuga compound and with a chakra leap he jumped to the roofs and took off as high speed. He had to cover a 20-minute walk in less than 5 minutes. Well, if his ancestors could cover a 7-day journey in just 2 days with their village at stake, he could damn well do this with Heis in the line. As he jumped from house to house clearing whole streets heading for his apartment, he mentally cursed Hiruzen for not letting him learn the Hiraishin yet. It would have come in so handy right now. But let out a sigh of relief when he could see his door, but his eyes bulged seeing his watch, less than a minute to go. He shot across the houses like a bat out of hell, knowing Anko's sadistic nature and what would happen if he was late even by a second. As the very second ticked down, and with 10 seconds to spare, he burst through the door and skidded to a halt. Safe. Naruto yelled as he stopped, getting an applause from Anko, who was waiting for him. By the skin of your ass, Anko laughed as she got up from the seat. Now let's pick up where we left off, shall we? She said with a smirk, but frowned when Naruto shook his head. Sorry hubby Haim, no, I have a much better idea of how we can have fun. It's something I read 4 years ago that I just remember and I've been meaning to try out, but I can guarantee you'll enjoy it 5 times more than anything we've done so far, Naruto said with a very lecherous smile on his face, making Anko shiver in anticipation. Oh, and what's this? She asked, barely able to contain her excitement. This, Naruto said as he raised his hands into a familiar seal, and Anko's eyes widened. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. And as the smoke cleared, 5 Naruto stood where there once was one, and Anko gulped at the realization of what was about to happen dawned on her, and she only uttered one word before she was lifted into the bedroom at high speed.